I want to talk about the general problem in the ESG world about data, which is the primary problem now, right, in all aspects of that. Take the scope 3 example to highlight that. And then number 3, go into what I think will be the future problem in ESG once we get beyond data, which will be engagement. Yeah? Okay. So who is this guy? So hi, I'm Jag. I'm the founder and CEO of Serda. This has been my journey so far. So I started as a software engineer. That's my identity. I absolutely love it. I cannot believe you can get paid for writing software. It's so fun. But then I sort of lost my way and got my MBA from Wharton, and then lost my way further and became a strategy consultant. And then I sort of made my way back, onto entrepreneurship, doing some PE investments, mainly in India. And then about 6 years ago, I founded Serda. Okay, so one of the reasons for finding Serda is because, of course, I saw there was a problem, but also because I wanted to go back to my tech roots, right? I wanted to start building again. I wanted to build, it just felt like coming home for me, right? Building tech again. So what is Serda? So this is our mission. Our mission is at Serda, which is a software company, it's a SaaS product, is to enable our clients to do business with good companies, okay? And we've very deliberately kept good very vague, because good means what is good for our clients. So our clients set the criteria of who they want to work with, and we enable the clients to enforce those criteria. Typically, that criteria, of course, means, okay, these companies are reputable. You're legally allowed to work with these companies, especially in the light of Russia sanctions, etc., with evolving sanctions. They will keep your data and private and secure. And lastly, if you want, they are sustainable and socially responsible. Okay, so you or the clients, our clients, determine what good is, and we basically take care of the rest, the master system for the rest, right? So for a client, what we do, what Serda can do is, sort of implement, your criteria for good across your investment portfolios, across your suppliers, or even different initiatives within the firm, within a large firm, right? So this is Serda, a software company. So these are the type of companies we're like, this is, if you will, what makes me the proudest is the type of companies we're able to serve, even as a relatively young company, right? So I know this is a finance sort of group, so you'll recognize Block, which was formerly called Square. You might recognize Visa, obviously. But then we sort of, we go across to other sort of firms as well, especially where supply chains are critical, like Walmarts and Boeings of the world, right? So this is, if you will, our pride and joy at Serda, our clients. And then to support our clients, we recently raised a Series A investment. It was led by Point72's fintech arm, which is one of the largest fintech firms in New York. Justin Khan, who is the founder of Twitch, I don't know if you know, Drew Houston, the founder of Dropbox, and Mantis, which is I don't know if EDM fans know, this is the Grammy-winning music duo, the Chainsmokers, right? So yes, we are planning an amazingly fun board meeting next month with backstage access and the whole thing. And these guys are so fun. So according to the World Economic Forum, the biggest problem that organizations face in implementing ESG is just sort of data, right? So let's dig into the various aspects of data that sort of the data challenges that organizations face. Okay. So obviously, it starts with collecting the right data. And this collecting the right data could be like primary collection, like primary data collection, right? From your suppliers, from your portfolio of investments or your loan portfolio, from different initiatives within the company. Or it could be sort of data collection through like, sort of third parties, right? Of course, data validation and enrichment. So when you collect this data, you have to, sort of come up with a way to validate it, right? So you sort of corroborate that data through secondary data sources. All of us are well aware of many of the data sources. Many of them are presenting in the exhibitor hall. So we need to validate that data. The next panel is about greenwashing. So it's gonna it's critically important, right? Obviously, once we sort of gather the data and we validate it, obviously we want to make sure that we've done some risk analytics on top of that to make either judgment decisions or at least track progress towards any sort of good goals, and in the context of this sort of conference, our ESG goals, right? And once you sort of make those decisions, to track overall against your sort of organizational goals or the goals you may have committed to your investors, you want to report, and you want to report both sort of towards your immediate organization goals, but you also want to feed this data into your sort of data warehouse, right? Data warehouse, enterprise systems, etc. Okay. Now this is, anyone who works in ESG knows that this is not a small problem, right? This is each aspect of this, many organizations have work streams dedicated to sort of each aspect of this, right? If you can just do a show of hands, like, do data challenges, do you agree with the statement that the number one challenge that organizations face in ESG implementation is data? Like, can we do a show of hands? Who agrees? Universally, right? I mean, you hardly ever get that so this is like at the start of like a journey for a lot of us, a lot of the company. So let's take an example of sort of the specific problem for the use case where you want to collect data from your suppliers, right? Where a company is trying to basically do this across their supply chain, which is basically called Scope 3 emissions, right? So this is, just to highlight some of these problems, right? So, a lot of, this is news to a lot of people, not to the people, who are sort of, in deep in the supply chain world, but 2/3 of your organization impact is actually dependent on your supply chain, right? Organization's ESG impact. So this is, your carbon footprint, your social impact, everything, right? So if, a lot of, I guess organizations have made very sort of deep commitments towards, net zero, etc. So unless people are looking at the supply chain, you're missing 2/3 of the sort of the impact there, right? So this is, if you're not worried about this, most companies will have to worry about this very shortly, right? So let's see what that means. I mean, and this also means, obviously supply chain of your, investment portfolio, right? If that's where, your focus is. So to collect data from thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of suppliers, you need to give them secure logins. So that they can log in and you know that the data is presented by an authorized person at the supplier, right? It's non-trivial. You want to gather structured data based on the risk, commodity, and regulation, right? You don't want to do one of those big forms that everybody has to fill out and everybody hates, right? You want to ask for specific structured information, right? From each region, for each commodity, etc., right? Most of us work at global businesses. You definitely want sort of local languages. You want to collect data in local languages. You may want to translate some of that data. And it's not a one-time activity, right? Most of your portfolio, your suppliers, you have to collect data quarterly, annually, etc. So just data collection is a massive, massive problem, right? Now let's look at validation. So in sort of the world of like supplies and supply chain, the main validation sources that we see are, things like EcoVadis, sort of BBD, D&B is coming into this world. Obviously, S&P and others are already there. And then if you want to, for the social impact, you want to validate the diversity credentials of your suppliers. So, are they diverse, are they owned by a diverse group? Are they women-owned? Are they veteran-owned, et cetera, right? So you're trying to basically do a lot of validation here. Once you've validated the data, you need to sort of flag companies. So you need to determine your thresholds and see, okay, this threshold is beyond what our company wants to work with. You might want to escalate if it's a critical supplier to the person who wants to work with the supplier, saying, hey, this falls below a threshold. You might need sort of exceptional exception permission, et cetera, to do that, right? And obviously, after having sort of gathered all this data, you have to report and sort of integrate. So you integrate with your with your systems, but track progress towards your goals, right? And like I mentioned before, feed data to your data warehouse. So just in sort of one area, you can see all the different data collection, data sort of validation, reporting, disclosure challenges, right? Non-trivial, but I would argue solvable problem. So let's get to something, right? So this is the the future ESG challenge. So the data collection and reporting is just establishing the baseline, right, for us. Where are we today? So we can track progress, but to make progress, we have to engage. Engage with different groups within the company, engage with our portfolio of investments, engage with our suppliers, right? There's just no, so now influencing this at scale, to try to meet your goals is going to be critical, right? So, this is the first time Gartner has made an unqualified statement on ESG. So Gartner has, mentioned that every single firm in the world is on the path for net zero. Typically they qualify all these statements, right? All these consulting firms do, right? This is an unqualified statement. So we are all moving towards net zero, right? You probably work at organizations where you have those commitments already, right? You have a deadline, right? By this X date, etc. Many of you may have made commitments, explicit commitments to your investors. There are implicit commitments to your customers and your employees, right? So this is, we have to make progress, right? So to make progress, we have to engage to make improvements, right? So here are some examples of how and what engagement one can do to make a difference. And so for suppliers, we've talked, want to make sure that they sign your code of conduct so that, they don't have any policies, etc., that do not align with your values, right? And this is, what we see, of course, in, sort of human rights and, labor laws and, obviously, beyond that in, non-discrimination laws, etc., right? Or policies within the supplier. You need to integrate, ESG in your RFP process, which is probably the biggest incentive for suppliers, right? To get better at their ESG ratings. And some of the things that we are doing with some of our more innovative customers is an internal Yell. So what that means is you sort of collect scores from existing suppliers, and this includes your ESG scores, and you share that across your organization so that when anyone in your organization is looking for suppliers, they might sort of want to filter by, okay, I want sustainable suppliers, I want your socially responsible suppliers, obviously I want suppliers who performed well for a company in the past, right? So like an internal Yell. For your investment portfolio, most of sort of the many investors have taken the approach that, an engagement-centric approach, right? It's not just like, disinvestment if they don't meet the criteria. So to track for that, sometimes you want your sort of portfolio of investments to make commitments. How do you track those commitments, right? So to track commitments and communicate those commitments back to influence them, you want to engage them, right? about one of your portfolio of investments, or if there's a generic sort of issue in a region, you may need an information request from your sort of portfolio of investments in that region, right? And obviously, in the extreme case, and we'll get there, you might be contractually obligated to send disinvestment warnings, right? For example, if you loan to someone who just isn't meeting their commitments, or invest in a company that just is not meeting their commitments, right? Internal initiatives, for a lot of us in complex, large organizations, that can be the hardest nut to crack, right? My wife works in one of those, and it's just managing the different initiatives across different across sort of different groups is really hard, right? So you want to communicate benchmarks, escalate red flags, offer incentives, etc. So these are the ways by which you can engage at scale to make a difference, right? With your ESG goals. This is what I think the world is going to, right? So how do we solve this problem, both a data collection and engagement problem? I think this can be solved with a master control system for ESG. And we think these are the core capabilities and the criteria for selection of a master control system for ESG. We think are the most important sort of criteria for selection of that, right? So obviously you need custom workflows that can go across your suppliers, different initiatives, and your investments, right? You want an open system that already has many of the integrations that you're looking for, but more importantly, this is such an evolving world that you want a system that can easily add new integrations, and ideally, has an integration framework that can just quickly plug in those integrations, right? Modular, like I think all of us have probably been seen IT projects that have gone on forever. They never complete, right? They never meet their objective. So, especially in a complex world, an evolving world like ESG, you want to deploy in a modular manner, right? You want to deploy absolutely. So you want to go live first, ideally within 3 months, max within 6 months. Meet some goals, meet some objectives, and then grow from there, right? International, we've talked about. Templates, I think, is critical because, again, this is an evolving world. These sort of a software that may have some best practices may not sort of remain best practices. Regulation is evolving. The SEC is voting, I think, next week on some new regulations, right? So you obviously want something that, you want templates in the software that can evolve with you, and then if it can power some of your business processes as well, like in the case of supplier, like assessments or investment assessments, etc. Ad hoc data requests. I mean, then you can the engagement part becomes a lot easier, right? So I think what you want to the approach that we've seen not work is just peer-to-peer integrations among various systems without this master system, because I mean that's default what companies would go to, right? Which is, well, we've got a few systems, let's just try to integrate them together and that'll be fine, right? But what we've seen is that really offers data challenges, coordination challenges, scale-up challenges, right? So I think the right way is sort of a master sort of software system that controls across your ESG initiatives, right? That can be deployed in a modular manner, integrates with various systems, can do all the custom workflows, etc. And I mean, of course, you could sort of do this on a custom because each organization is different. Your integrations are different, your workflows are different. I mean, what we think is the right answer is a no-code sort of platform for this, right? So no-code platform where you can drag and drop, create these workflows, drag and drop, do these integrations, right? Has templates, etc. Right? So, this is what we think is going to sort of lead us to success. And I think just maybe sort of finally the last thing that I would want to add to this is, I heard a statement yesterday that ESG is all about risk management. I sort of understand that this is where ESG is today, right? But my belief is that this is not where ESG will be in the future. Like in the future, ESG will be about engagement. So my sort of firm offers various services, right? And the calls that I'm most excited about are the ESG calls, right? I'm like, we're all prepared, we're like, because this is one way we get to make a difference, right? So I'm, this is one thing that I can explain to my kid, like what we do. So the risk part, they don't get. So I think my, if you will, sort of one piece of, if there's one takeaway that I can offer is, let's treat this as, yes, it's a risk management, disclosures, reporting issue now, but by putting the right systems in place, we will be able to not only do what is required today, but also what is required in the future, which will be making a difference.